Guys, this is Seize Your Mind, the podcast about soccer, mental toughness, and life. I'm your host, Brandon Stone. Today's guest is Anthony Pulis. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Pulis.
Pulis. Close.
Yeah, close.
Anthony had a 14-year playing history in England and U.S. and is now the assistant coach for Inter Miami FC. He was the head coach for St. Louis in the USL, and has had a lot of other great coaching, 6 years of coaching experience. And how are you today, Anthony?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Just excited to have you on. I'm super excited about Inter Miami. I know things kind of got put on hold, but they'll be resuming soon.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a strange period that we're going through at the moment. I think, especially with our club, I think there's been such a long build-up phase, so to speak, and then everybody's really excited. Obviously, we played the first two games on the road, and then 2 days before our home opener, which I think was highly anticipated worldwide, this pandemic struck, and unfortunately that kind of got taken away from us. So it's been a strange start to life in Miami for all of us here, and strange for everybody around the world. But at a time like this, football isn't the most important thing. I think the most important thing right now is the health of everybody, and it's important, I think, to go on record and thank all the hospital workers and the men and women on the front lines that are doing such a fantastic job that maybe we took for granted a little bit before this happened.
It's very true, very true. It's definitely brought everyone closer together, even though we're social distancing.
Yeah, no, I mean, personally speaking, for me, it's probably the most time I've spent with my kids. I mean, they're 7 and 5, and being in full-time professional soccer, especially I've been a head coach for the 4 years previous to this year. Time with them is at a premium. So to have this quality time with them and my wife, and we've just gone through the process of moving house as well. So it's been good to spend some time with them, and it certainly gives you perspective on everything in life, which, as I say, coaching can be 100 miles an hour and 24/7. So it's been a nice break a little bit, but I think everybody's just kind of itching now to get back out there and get back to some sort of normality. What that looks like in the future remains to be seen.
Right. I'm gonna ask you, kind of give me a history of how you changed from being a player to a coach. Did you always have coaching in mind as you were playing, or did it just come about? Tell me about that process for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously fortunate. I grew up in a footballing family. My dad was a player and has obviously been a long time head coach / manager and be successful in the English Premier League. So I've been fortunate to have grown up around that football environment. And from a young age, I always wanted to be a professional footballer. I always wanted to be a player. And then I think probably from the age of about 23, 24 is really when I started thinking about coaching. I mean, as I said, being around a football family is all I've really ever known. And I kind of knew it was going to be something that I wanted to do, but seriously thinking about it, 23, 24 was when I would start making notes about different coaches and managers that I'd worked under, and some things I liked, maybe things I didn't like, sessions I liked, sessions I didn't like, meetings, everything, just to kind of start thinking and preparing myself. And then it was, I moved over to the States in 2012 to play for Orlando City, and I played for 3 years for them. And the 2014 season was an interesting year because everybody knew that the club was going to be transitioning into the MLS in 2015. So it was an uncertain time for a lot of the people at the club, whether they were going to be kept on, whether they were going to be released. And as I said, it was a strange year. About halfway through the year, I got approached from the club, and they asked me if I would be interested in joining the coaching staff. They weren't going to offer me a playing contract, but would I be interested in joining the staff? And it was a difficult decision because I was only 29 at the time, so relatively young, in my playing years. I still felt like I had some good years ahead of me, but I'd already been coaching in the academy. I think once I moved to Orlando, I was doing sort of 2-3 nights a week in the academy and really trying to get my feet wet and get experience, because it was something, again, as I said, it was something that I knew I wanted to do. So it was a tough decision, but I took the opportunity to join the coaching staff, because I felt like joining a new club in the MLS at the time, as a young coach, would give me some really valuable experience, and almost looked at it like I was getting a head start on a lot of my peers, because I think a lot of players probably finish in their mid-30s around the age that I am now, and I thought, well, it gives me a chance to really gain some experience, get my feet wet at a good club, working with really good people that
Was
I
Kaká there yet?
respected a lot. Kaká just joined. Yeah, he just joined in that 2015 season. So the first year, 2015, I was almost like a jack of all trades. I mean, I was out there helping with the first team every day. I was training the reserves, the players that maybe didn't make the roster and travel. I was out in the academy by this point every night of the week, coaching all the different age groups. I helped out with the U23s, which was the PDL team that they had at the time, and then about 3/4 of the way through that year, the club decided they wanted to bring a B team into the organizational structure, and asked me would I want to be the head coach of the team. So I jumped at it, because I obviously had the year full time being around it, and then to be a head coach we were in the USL then was obviously a great privilege. So I took the Orlando City B team for 2 years, was the head coach of that team, and then I got the opportunity to join St. Louis for the head of the 2018 season. Did 2 years there, really enjoyed it, and then this opportunity.
How did that opportunity come about?
So Orlando City B was it was a team that the club at the time decided. So after the 2 years, we did the 2016 season, 2017 season. For financial reasons, they wanted to almost put the team on a hiatus for a year. They made a decision that they didn't want to continue the team for a year. I think they wanted to wait until USL League One got introduced this past season, for a variety of different reasons. So it left me in obviously a situation where, well, do I stay on and move into a different role within the club, or do I see if there are any other potential opportunities out there? And I got a call from St. Louis. Had a good call with them for about an hour one day, and then a few days later they sent me a message and asked me would I be interested in flying over there to go through the interview process. So obviously I was still employed by Orlando City at the time, so they had to get the permission, and I flew out there and had an interview over a couple of days, which at the time felt like it went fairly well. But I'd heard that they were interviewing some big names at the time, and I wasn't really sure what the situation would look like for me. But I looked at it as an opportunity to gain experience. I'd never done a job interview in my life. I got given the opportunities in Orlando from being there as a player, and obviously the people around the club seeing the work that I was putting in. But then to actually go through an interview process was really interesting for me, and it was a great experience. And then probably a week after the interview, my agent had said, I think you're in with a really good chance. I think there's one or two others. We'll have to see. And then I had a call, and they offered me the position. So it was a bit of a whirlwind, couple of weeks, to be honest. But I jumped at the opportunity. I mean, I'd worked obviously 2 years in a B team setup, which was really good grounding for me as a coach, because you have to be really adaptable. It's a difficult position because you're managing almost 3 buckets of players. You're managing the core group of USL players, but then you're also managing MLS players that are coming down to get some minutes, that maybe aren't seeing regular time with the first team. You know, and you get maybe MLS players that come back from injury that the MLS staff say, look, we want player X just to get 45 minutes today because he's coming back from an injury. And then you've got academy players that you're trying to promote and push through the system as well. So trying to manage 3 different groups of players, and emotionally for the USL players was tough at times, because they would obviously put so much work in a week in training, and then sometimes 24 to 48 hours before one of our games, you kind of have a meeting and you find out you've got 4, 5, 6 MLS players that need minutes. Then the guys that you've been working with all week, you have to pull them and explain why they're not going to be playing. But what I try and do, again, I'm sure we'll cover kind of leadership, is one of my big pillars, if you like, is to be open and to be honest, and to really try and make sure there's a lot of open communication. So the guys that we signed to the USL roster, I made it really clear from day one that, look, this is a team there's going to be a lot of fluctuation within it. There's going to be weeks where MLS players are going to come across because they need minutes. They might be coming back from injury, There might be weeks where the MLS head coach doesn't want them to play in USL. So it might be just our USL group, some academy players, but trying to make those players aware before they sign that this is a situation. So by making them clear and aware before, I think certainly helped. But it was difficult because you could never really build and hone it exactly the way you wanted it, because there were so many moving parts with it. It was a fantastic experience for me at the age of 30, 31 to be a head coach of a team, and we were playing against established USL teams week in, week out. And I remember we played away at Cincinnati the one day, and it was that game broke the record for a USL regular season attendance game for over 30,000. So an experience like that for me as a young coach and some of the young players we had at the time was invaluable. But I knew I wanted to be a head coach of my own team, and when that opportunity at St. Louis come up, I jumped at it. It was a great club. It was a team that I felt like had underachieved a little bit. It's got some really good facilities there, good infrastructure, a good ownership group, and great supporters, really good following. And it's one of the, people say it's the birthplace of soccer in the States. So I saw that as a real privilege and a great opportunity to go there. And we had a decent amount of success there over the 2 years. I mean, we made the playoffs in 2018 for the first time in the club history. And then last year we had a fantastic run in the Open Cup, and we beat 2 MLS teams and got knocked out eventually by Atlanta United. And we just fell short of the playoffs because I think the Open Cup run kind of derailed us a little bit. But I had some really, really good success there. Worked with some fantastic people. The players that we brought in and recruited were great guys to work with, a really good staff. So it was, I've got a real fond place in my heart. But then this opportunity came up to join what I think is going to be one of the best, if not the best, franchises in an MLS in Inter Miami, with the ownership group and the training facilities, the stadium plans. Was an opportunity I just felt like it was too good to turn down.
Of course. And there's not going to be that inconsistency with this team like there was with Orlando?
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I didn't have the inconsistency in St. Louis, so that was an independent team, albeit there was a budget and we were restricted to what we could bring in, but we had a group of players that I could mold and work with every day, which was enjoyable. But obviously coming here now, it's a step up. I mean, you were working at a higher level, working with top players day in, day out, with a fantastic head coach, Diego Alonso. And again, that was a big reason why I came here, because I'm still only 35, so I've still got a lot of learning to do. And I kind of been in the deep end, so to speak, as a head coach for 4 years. I really enjoyed being a head coach, but I felt like now might be the time for me to kind of be in a different position. I've never really been an assistant before, to learn a different role, but then also learn from Diego, who's won CONCACAF Champions League with 2 different teams. He's won it with Monterrey, won it with Pachuca, and had a lot of success, and heard a lot of good things about him. Had a real good conversation with him before I joined, and I felt like it was a real good opportunity for me to learn and to add strings to my bow and enhance my repertoire as a coach, so to speak, and to challenge my thoughts, my ideas on how things should be done. So it's been enjoyable so far. I do miss being a head coach at times, and I know it's something I'm probably going to want to do at some point again. But for now, I'm really privileged and grateful to be in. I'll be a part of a fantastic club with Inter Miami.
Is the assistant coach to head coach relationship, like, are they very open to feedback from you, or is it kind of just like you can suggest something, but I'm going to do it my way? What's that relationship like?
No, it's very open. It's very inclusive. I mean, we've got a decent sized staff. Diego brought a couple of guys with him that he'd had before in Mexico, and obviously I've come in that didn't know him, and he didn't know me. But obviously, as I said, we had some good conversation before I joined the club. But he's very open. I think the thing I like about Diego is he's always asking people's opinions, and he wants people to challenge him. He doesn't just want people that are kind of yes men, so to speak, and agree with everything. So I think that's good. And ultimately, and at the end of the day, I mean, I think because I've been in his position as a head coach, I can kind of resonate with that a little bit and empathize that it's important to ask other people's opinions, but at the end of the day, you've got to make the decision. And I think the important thing is, as a staff, is that once we have our discussion and we throw ideas out there, and once Diego makes a decision, that everybody gets behind him and supports him 100%, which I think we've done so far. So yeah, it's a good environment to be in. Everybody wants to learn, everybody wants to get better. There's a real growth mindset amongst the staff, which personally I think is key.
Did you already know David before joining?
No, I didn't know. So I knew Paul McDonough, who's the sporting director. So Paul was in Orlando when I was there. Paul joined Orlando as the general manager when I was playing, and was part of the leadership group, so to speak, that kind of gave me an opportunity coaching in Orlando initially. Obviously, we went down different paths. Paul then moved to Atlanta, and I moved on to St. Louis, and we've always stayed in touch. And Paul was the one that kind of gave me the call in the off season. I mean, I knew a couple of the other people, Nicky Budlich as well, who's the head of soccer operations, but Paul was the driving force behind the move here, and obviously I've got a lot to thank him for.
Now, you went to school in Manchester, is that correct?
No, I went to school
LinkedIn.
I went to school in Bournemouth. So we grew up in Bournemouth, on the south coast, and then I actually enrolled in a sports science degree through the Professional Footballers Association at Manchester Metropolitan University. So that was an online, those were online classes that I took. So that was something, again, when I got into coaching, I wanted to try and get a little bit more of an idea and an understanding of the sports science element. So I enrolled in that through the Players Union actually in the UK, and took some online classes with that.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering if you were in Manchester when David was playing back there.
No, I'm actually grew up a Manchester United fan, big Man United fan. So it's actually quite surreal now working for him or working with him. It's been interesting. He's been around the facility a few times, not a lot, but he's a really great guy, very humble, very respectful, and treats everybody fantastically well. So yeah, as I said, interactions with him have been limited so far, but he seems a great person.
So I have this quote unquote Bible that I use with my teams. I help them with the mental side, like confidence, motivation. And there's a book called Soccer: The Mind Game that I use religiously, and it's got David on the cover.
There
it's
you go.
From like 2000. I mean, it's like in horrible shape because I use it so much.
Who wrote that book? Who wrote that book?
Steve Bull and Chris Shambrook.
Okay.
They're two PhD guys out of the UK. And it was like 2000. Let's see how old this was. 2004.
Okay.
When it was written,
wow.
First written. Yeah.
Good.
But I use this thing religiously. And that's kind of why I started the podcast, was to kind of delve more into how different people teach their versions of, the mental side of the game.
Yeah.
So I know you said leadership. We talked about leadership just a little bit. How do you develop leaders within your players?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to empower them. I think you have to be open. I think it has to be made clear from day one that it's an open book, so to speak. It's inclusive. That what I try and do first and foremost is create a safe environment, an environment where the players feel safe, an environment where values that I've got regarding kind of hard work, honesty, humility, respect, self-discipline, that have got passion and that have got a growth mindset, that want to learn and want to get better. So having people in the building that are like-minded is the first thing. And then once we get them in, we try and have real open dialogue with everything, and making sure that everybody has a voice, that everybody feels safe to speak, and that it's not a situation where I'm the dictator and I tell everybody how it's going to be done. Ultimately, as a head coach, as I said before, you have the decision to make. But I think it's really important, and I think it's a lot more powerful if it comes from the players, and if the players can see it's been a team decision rather than it just being from the head coach. So I think a lot of communication, a lot of dialogue, a lot of meetings. We try and, or tried to, when I was a head coach, have a lot of individual meetings. We'd meet with the players on a regular basis, one-on-one, to go through clips of their last game, but then also as a catch-up as well, to ask how things are at home, and if they've got wife, girlfriend, kids, dogs, what we tried to do was really get a broad understanding of them as people and what made them tick. And then I think it's a process, right? Because ultimately, players, you as a coach need to earn their trust, and that becomes key, I think. But again, trust takes time, and I think once they see that you're living by your words and your actions are backing everything up, and there's a consistency to those actions, then, and they know that you've got their best interests at heart, and they genuinely see that you as a coaching staff want to improve them as players and help them get better, as well as winning at the same time, then I think for me that's the key. And then you can kind of get that engagement, you get that buy-in, and then it becomes powerful. And I think allowing the players to express themselves, to speak up, becomes key in that. I think what we tried to do is have a leadership committee of a small group of players, and then they almost, the end goal really is, yeah, what we did last year, we had 4, I think. This year, if I'd have stayed, I probably would have had a few more. Probably would have gone for 4 or 5, and maybe would have tweaked it a little bit. Would have tried to get players in the leadership committee that almost covered every base of the locker room, if that makes sense. So maybe it's a rookie, maybe it's somebody that hasn't played in the league before. So rather than it being the normal older experienced players on your leadership committee, maybe, yeah, I think that seems to be the norm, is like leadership group, you just go and get the veterans, you go and get the old guys. Whereas reflecting at the end of the season, I thought, well, maybe next year it might make sense to have a few different faces on there that maybe people wouldn't expect, to bring out the leadership qualities. But then what you do then when you meet with them, you're really probably getting a better idea of how the locker room is, rather than it always coming from the veteran guys that maybe don't talk to the rookies as much. For example, it maybe gives you a better chance of really what's the phrase I'm looking for? But to get an idea of how everybody is and how everybody's doing, and what ideas have they got, that things that we could do to improve on and off the field. Gives
a more like robust perspective, I guess.
Yeah, just as I said, it gives you more of a broader look, a broader landscape within the locker room, within the whole group of players, as to what they're thinking, how they are. And as I said, for me, the meetings were always about, what can we do better? What can we do to help you? What can we do to help you improve more? Is it the meals after training? Is it the way that we travel? Is it the content of the training sessions? Is it the duration and the content of the video meetings? And everything that, because that's, again, anything that you can do to make the players feel better and feel like they're in an environment where people care about them and that generally want them to improve. I think that's a really, really powerful thing.
So do they even have as much power as like, hey, we like doing this exercise more, this certain training thing? Like,
right. Well, look, I mean, there has to be a balance to it, right? I think that's something that I've over the 4 or 5 years I've been coaching, I've come to realize, is with everything there has to be a balance, because I don't think it can get to a stage where it's all from the players, because realistically, I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, I went back to England, and I spent a couple of weeks visiting different clubs, different coaches, different managers, to see how they did things, to try and pick some things up. And Sean Dyche, who's the manager at Burnley, said to me that we work off a one for them, one for us ratio. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, in training, we'll maybe do one exercise for them that they enjoy. So maybe it's a possession exercise or a small-sided game that they enjoy, and then we'll do one for us. One for us is one for the coaching staff. Maybe it's a tactical element of the game. Maybe it's a phase of play that we feel like we need to improve on, or it's good and enable us to be successful against the upcoming opponent. So trying to find that balance where it's not all, this is probably some of the mistakes I made when I first got into coaching, is there was a real heavy emphasis on tactics, and maybe too much, where I understand players sometimes can get bored with that. But then I've also played under coaches and managers where there's no structure, there's no tactics, there's no organization. It's just small-sided games, possessions every day. Then you go out there on a game day and you don't really know what's expected of you because there isn't any structure. So again, trying to find the balance between the two, I think, is key. So it's almost trying to find, having them in a framework, but within the framework, there's some freedom to express themselves. So I think if you're creative enough as a coach, you can create exercises that are enjoyable, but at the same time, there's themes to them, and there's key principles that are involved within the exercise that are related back to the way that we want to play and the style that we want to try and implement.
So that kind of goes into my next question of fun. How do you make your trainings more fun? How do you make the culture more fun?
Yeah.
Still be professional?
Well, I think what you have to do is, for me anyway, is to try and put my player's head back on. And fortunately, it's not that long ago that I was playing. So trying to think about, well, what do players want? A, they want as many touches on the ball as possible. B, they want goal mouth action. They want to be in positions where they're going to be able to score goals, where they're going to be able to make goals, where they're going to be able to create. And I think creating those exercises within the week, again, where there's balance, where there's not stops, there's not a blow of the whistle every 30 seconds and the coach is stepping in to say, well, you need to move here and you need to move there, and you should have passed to him and not him. And it becomes, because again, throughout my career, I've played for all different types, and there's coaches I played for that literally would blow the whistle every 2 minutes. You'd be like, please, can we just get some rhythm and play? So players want to play. They want to express themselves. Players want to work hard. They want to be in an environment where they come off the pitch dripping with sweat, knowing that they've had a really good training session. So I think creating exercises that are specific to the game. I think I've watched so many sessions, and I try and really stay away from sessions that are not realistic and there's no realism to them. I think every exercise has to be realistic and has to bring out an element or a moment of the game that is going to be there on a Saturday or a Tuesday whenever you play your game. But I think players want to have touch of the ball. They want to get in a rhythm. They want to get in a flow. They want to compete. I think that's the other thing, is what we try to do anyway is at St. Louis is a couple of days a week, make every single exercise competitive. So there's a winner and there's a loser. And for the loser, there's a little punishment. It might be some shuttle runs. It might be some extra push-ups. Whatever it might be a butts up in goal exercise where they can have a laugh and a joke at the end, but making it really competitive where there's a winner and the loser, because then it gets the juices flowing a little bit. So I think those things are what we try and implement.
Cool. How do you help players that have had a dip in their confidence levels?
Yeah, good question. So I think a couple of things. One is to reiterate to them, especially if it's players that you've recruited and you've signed, that you've recruited them for a reason, right? You wouldn't have signed them had you thought that they weren't good enough to be there. I think that's the first thing, is to reiterate that you've got confidence in them, that you've got faith in them, because you brought them to the club or the organization, if that's the case. The second thing, what we try and do is we try and use a lot of video. So if it's for an example a forward that's not been scoring goals, is try and basically show them clips of themselves in training and in games. We'll give his 6 or 7 examples of you in training where you were getting in those positions in the box and making those near post runs, for example, that were giving you the opportunities to score goals. And maybe that's why you've not been doing it. So show them visually them when they're at the top of their game, so they can see themselves, and then finding out the reasons why the confidence levels, like what is it in their game that they. Yeah. So I think, as I said, I think showing them video clips of themselves of when they're playing well and when they're in a good run of form, and being specific with that. So for example, if it's a striker, if it's a forward, that maybe isn't scoring the goals that he was previously, or why is he not scoring the goals? Is it because he's not making those near post runs like we've asked him to, or like he's agreed that that's the area that we want to get him in? Is it because his hold up play isn't as effective as what it was previously, so he's not bringing other people into the game in those higher areas of the field that give him the opportunities to score? So what element of his hold up play isn't good? Is it because he's not using his body correctly? Is it because he's not arranging his feet quickly enough? What specific detail of that isn't as good as what it was before? So now, once we've identified what specific elements of his performance levels have dropped, show him and then work on him at the training ground. It might be 25 reps at the end of training of him literally just making those runs across the near post, and a coach or one of the other guys serving balls across for him to get used to hitting the back of the net again. So I think video of showing when he's doing things well, so he can actually see, yeah, I can do it, identifying what areas need the work, and then working on them on the training ground as well. So it's trying to cover all the bases.
Okay, so it's kind of like a recipe. There's different ingredients that go into scoring a goal, and for some reason, one of those ingredients or two of those ingredients are bad, and so you go and see, okay, what's bad? Let's fix that, and now see how it works.
Yeah, and try and stay away from being generic. I think that specificity is key, and giving real good detail.
Gotcha. Let's talk about visualization and mental rehearsal. Do you use that? Do you teach your athletes to use that?
I haven't, to be honest with you. I've heard a little bit about it. I've had a couple of preliminary discussions with people. I know a couple of players that have used it and have had some success with it, but it's not something I've got a vast amount of experience with. It is something that I would like to look into a little bit more and delve deeper into it to get a better understanding. But it would be difficult for me to give a real a good kind of rundown on what my thoughts are, because I haven't seen it and experienced it enough.
So I know when I played back in the day, I kind of did it without even realizing I was doing it. Just like after a game, I'd like play through my head what I could have done differently in that scenario, and it was just something that I would just daydream automatically and do it. It wasn't ever anything like I said, okay, right now I'm going to visualize it. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Did you do anything like that? Like,
I think as a player, I can always remember the position to receive the ball at my first touch. Is it just being brave and making sure that I'm always making good angles, alert, and I'm on the front foot for second balls and things like that. So trying to picture and think about when I play well, what are the things that I do well. And that's something, again, that we've spoken to the players about previously, and kind of even in early interviews with a lot of the guys we recruited, was asking them, well, what do you look like when you play well? Like, what do you feel like? What are the things that are consistent, be intentional, and narrow your focus on those key performance indicators, so to speak.
What about goal setting?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously something that we've done a little bit of with the players and with the teams. I heard a funny story from a team in England that used a sports psychologist, and they were going through kind of what should our goals be, and apparently an experienced player, really experienced player that had been really successful, kind of put his hand up and said, well, I've got a great idea. And he said, well, what's that? How about our goals are to prepare as best as we possibly can throughout the week to give us the best chance of winning the next game. Yeah, so I'd heard a really good story back home from a team in the UK that had used sports psychology. They were having a meeting about setting goals, and an experienced player that had played at a really high level kind of stopped and said, well, for me, the best goal that we can have is to prepare as best as we possibly can throughout the week to give ourselves the best chance of performing well and winning the next game. And then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. And it was something very similar, is kind of having a 1-0 mindset of win the next game. As I said, I think it's important from an organizational standpoint that you've got some medium to long-term goals, and that there is a vision in place, and there's a direction, and there's a purpose, and there's a reason. But especially in football, if you get caught up looking at that too much and you forget about the short term, you're never going to get there. So I've always been one for really focusing on the short term process of being the best you can be every day, of really making sure that your preparation and your process, as I said, to get ready for the next game, and to make sure that individually and collectively everybody's on the same page, everybody knows what's expected of them, everybody knows what are the things that we need to do really well to give ourselves the best chance of winning. Execute, you review it, and then you kind of learn from it, and then you move on to the next one. And it's kind of a cycle of those 3 or 4 things. And if you again, it's saying that if you get the process right consistently, then the outcomes will take care of themselves, and you'll get results. which ultimately is obviously what everybody wants in football, especially at the professional level.
So it's kind of like seeing a staircase of 10 steps. If you just focus on that last 10th step, which is winning the championship, and not focus on the one you got in front of you, you got to know where you're going, but you got to do that first step.
Of course you have. You've got to do that work first. Yeah, no, for sure. And then I think individually, goals, I think, again, it has to be it has to be a two-way thing between the player and the coach. I don't think it can come from just one or the other. And those goals have to certainly be within the structure and the framework of the team. But I think it's important to give players things to try and concentrate on. I'm not one for just talking to players about their weaknesses all the time and just the negatives, because I think sometimes that doesn't rub off the wrong way. I think there's nothing wrong with talking to players about what their strengths are and making them even better. I think you can certainly do that and certainly and talk about certain things that maybe need to be improved. But it's, again, I'll come back to the word balance. I think it has to be a balance. It has to be, well, you do these 2 or 3 things really well, so we're going to keep working on them to make them even better. But maybe there's 1 or 2 other things that we can improve on that will make you a better player, that might give you a better chance of playing at high levels, for example. And even when we've gone through individual video clips previously, it's, again, really trying to find a balance. And where's the player at that moment in time? Are they really, really high on confidence? Have they been playing really well? Have they been scoring lots of goals? And then understanding psychologically, well, maybe he's got the danger or there's a potential here for him getting a little bit complacent, him getting a little bit too big for his boots. So maybe you have to show him 4 negative clips and 2 positive clips to keep him hungry, to make sure that he's still on his toes and he's still making sure that he doesn't get too carried away with himself. Is it somebody that maybe hasn't been playing well, or something's been bothering him at home? Maybe he needs 5 positive clips and 1 negative clip. So it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, and you have to be adaptable.
You're kind of like a doctor. You got to know.
Yeah.
Each patient's different.
Exactly.
You don't prescribe the same medicine to the same patient, or the different patients.
Definitely.
How do you help your team have more chemistry, play together better? Is there anything you can do as a coach to help that?
Yeah, well, again, I think the recruitment process is key. Is making the players aware right at the beginning of what's expected of them. I'm a big one for expectations, of making players aware of what's expected of them, but then what's expected of the coaching staff, what they can expect from us, the level of professionalism that we'll bring every day, the high standards that we'll set, the environment that we'll create, the real thirst and hunger to improve them and to want them to give them the best chance of being successful and winning. So making them clear on what to expect, I think is key with that. But again, I think, as I said, it has to be an inclusive process where you're really including them in everything that you do.
Open communication seems to be a common theme. It's good. Very good.
Yeah.
What about preparing for match day, helping people with those match day nerves? What kind of things do you do to help players with that?
Comes down to preparation again. I think if the players know that every base has been covered during the preparation, then they can go out there and really feel at ease and be ready to go and perform. I think when players have been part of a team that's thorough and detailed and have been through situations, whether it be on the field in training, whether it be in the video room, of this is what we expect the opposition to set up like, this is how we can win the game. So for example, these are their attacking tendencies, this is the way that we're going to press, this is the way that we're going to set up defensively to stop them, but then this is the way that they defend. These are the spaces that are available for us to exploit. This is how we're going to go and do that. So what we would always try and do is just show a couple of video clips before training on a certain element of the game, go and train it, and then we would repeat that process throughout the week, so that by the time game day comes, there's no surprises. I think that was always one of my fears as a coach is players going out there and not quite sure what was going to come about, what was to be expected. Now, look, teams, you're always going to get potentially one or two surprises. You might have prepared to play against a team that has played 4-4-2 all year, and then all of a sudden turns up and they play a 3-4-3 and surprise you a little bit. So you might always get one or two outliers like that, but I think 9 times out of 10, if you can be consistent and thorough and detailed with your process, then the players can go out there confident, knowing that every base has been covered and that they're in a prime position to go and perform at their best. Now, regarding nerves, I think for me anyway, those kind of butterflies and those nerves that you get before games, I think that's healthy. I think that's important, because I think it shows that you care, and I think that's that's something that I miss as a player. I certainly still get that buzz, and it's a different buzz as a coach, but I think you need that. I think there's something in that gives you that special feeling on a game day that you're competing and you're playing for something. I think players that don't get nervous and don't get those butterflies and that really cool feeling before kickoff, I question their motives and where they're at psychologically a little bit, I think.
Love it. What has been the worst thing that's happened to you personally that ended up being the best thing that happened to you?
I think not getting given an MLS contract in Orlando in 2014. I know we discussed it at the start. I think I, like all the guys on the roster at the time, were working to be part of that roster for the inaugural season in the MLS. And obviously when the club came to me and told me that they weren't going to offer me that contract, I'd be a liar if I said it didn't disappoint me and it didn't hurt me a little bit.
You're gutted.
Yeah, of course. But then the opportunity to jump into coaching at a young age has been a massive, massive blessing. The experience I've got and the experience I've gained and been through have been invaluable. And I wouldn't be sat here now talking to you as an assistant coach at Inter Miami in the MLS if that opportunity didn't come about. And I could have walked away from Orlando and gone and signed another playing contract somewhere else. But thankfully I didn't. Thankfully I took the plunge into coaching at that early age, and thankfully it's turned out to be a good decision.
Love that. Who's been one of your most influential influences in your life, and why?
I'd have to say my dad. Obviously, he's coached at a high level. He's been around professional football his whole life, and he's worked his way up to be a head coach in the English Premier League. He coached in all 4 divisions in England and worked extremely hard. Spent a lot of hours, sacrificed a lot of things to work his way up through the divisions, and obviously has been really successful. And I've been fortunate to see that at close hand and see what it takes from a work ethic standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, to dealing with adversity, to dealing with maybe getting fired and dealing with people criticizing you in the media and having thick skin and having a real belief in your ideas and your methods, that it will enable you to be successful if you're relentless with it, if you persevere. And I think a lot of those values and those principles that my dad holds have really rubbed off on me and hopefully will stand me in good stead.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people just see kind of the tip of the iceberg and they don't see what it takes to get to that point. And
100%, yeah.
And it looks like you got to see firsthand what it really takes to get there.
No, it's just the same with a lot of things in life, right? People only see, as you said, that tip of the iceberg. They don't see the countless hours on the training field, the countless hours in front of a TV screen, cutting up film, driving to maybe go and watch a player to try and recruit him, to drive to go and meet the player and maybe his parents or his agent. And yeah, there's so many things that go into being a successful soccer coach. Maybe not just a successful soccer coach, a successful businessman. In every walk of life, it's no surprise that when you listen to stories about highly successful people, the underlying values are always the same, right? It's work ethic, it's respect, it's discipline, it's passion, it's commitment, it's perseverance, it's being relentless, self-belief, being driven, hungry, humble. I mean, all those key components seem to be consistent with people that are successful now. Sometimes you need a bit of luck. Sometimes you need a bounce of the ball. Sometimes you need opportunities to present themselves, and you have to be in the right place at the right time. But I certainly think if you do those key things consistently over time, that eventually you will get some success.
Yeah, what you said, sometimes you need luck. Sometimes you need to realize that not getting that MLS contract is actually a good thing, because I'm sure it took you a while to realize that.
Yeah, and I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason as well. I do think in life that everything happens. And as I said, I was at the time disappointed and thought, well, I'm good enough. I should be on that roster next year. And then once I kind of had time to think about it, to talk to some people that the opinions that I really valued and people that were close to me, and realized that it's actually stripped this back and really evaluate this. It would be a good opportunity, and as I said, thankfully it has, and it's put me in a really good position.
If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that be?
To have a little bit more balance and to relax and calm down a little bit more. I've always wanted to do things and accomplish things really, really quickly. And at a young age, of certain things, I'll give you an example, right? So when my first professional club was Portsmouth in the UK, and there were a couple of guys in my age group that actually made it into the first team at like 16 or 17. They made their professional debuts really, really early, and I was in the kind of same age group as them, and it got me really frustrated. I'm like, why is that not happening to me? I'm putting the work in, and then my mindset at the time would be to then overtrain. So I would go back and train again in the evening. I'd be training on days off, and I'd end up just doing too much. So that when it was really important, when game day and training sessions came around, I was shattered because I'd been doing too much, thinking that I was doing the right thing, but actually it was being counterproductive. So I think when I look back, I wish I'd had a little bit more perspective. I didn't develop physically until I was a little bit older. So I probably, the way that those guys were at 16, 17, it probably took me till 18, 19 to really fill out and physically develop anyway. So I was never ready for that jump. I was ready a few years later, but at that point I wasn't. I think having perspective, having a vision, knowing what you want to achieve, being patient with it and how you're going to get there. So I think, as I said, balance, perspective, and sometimes taking a deep breath and relaxing, and sometimes having other interests and having things to take your mind off it. It certainly helped me with the children. Having children, I think that's been a welcome release for me. So when I come home from work and I play with them and read them a story before they go to bed, it helps take my mind off things, and I think it certainly helped. And I think it's something that in people in all walks of life would certainly benefit from.
Awesome. Anthony, I think it's a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Who's the most positive player you know that you think I should have on next?
Oof. Is this on the record or off the record? Because I've got quite a few and I don't want to single out one.
Okay, we can do it off the record.
Yeah,
I've got
I've got recording.
A few. Once I hit stop, then I'll let you tell me.
Yeah.
So thanks for being on. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you much success with Inter Miami FC.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.